what is happening on the ground continuously. People are getting killed and massacred on a daily basis in Palestine, right?
Mhm.
So one can understand, people's concern. I mean, unfortunately, the legal process takes time, and uh, one is never assured of the outcome. But based on the law and based on the facts and based on precedent of the ICJ, there is no doubt, and I'm not saying this myself. There is no doubt that the South Africans should win.
Yeah.
A temporary order.
South Africa believes that the publicly available evidence of the scale of the destruction resulting from the bombardment of Gaza and the deliberate restriction of food, water, medicines, and electricity available to the population of Gaza demonstrates that the government of Israel, not Jewish people or Israeli citizens, the government of Israel and its military is intent on destroying the Palestinians in Gaza as a group.
World experts on this, world experts on genocide, have said this. There's a professor, R.A.Z. Siegel, who is Jewish, who's Israeli,
Mhm.
and one of the preeminent experts on the Holocaust and on genocide. And he's also a historian.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'll be happy to share a video interview with him where he categorically says, the everything that he's seen from the intent to the actions, and in his view, it's a strong case. There's two other people I can mention very quickly. There's a guy called Professor Francis Boyle, Boyle. Um, he's a lawyer, and interestingly, he was the first lawyer before the ICJ to win what they call the temporary order. And so he's actually won two cases before. And so Professor Francis Boyle, Boyle, he said in his interview, and I'll be happy to share this, is a very short a video clip of him where he was asked, he read all the pleadings, that means all the documents of the court case on both sides, of course. And this was immediately after the presentation of the South African case. He came to the conclusion that South Africa has presented a solid and an quote unquote airtight case,
Yeah.
right? From his experience as somebody who's worked on genocide issues, and of course, there's one more Canadian expert, Professor William Shabas, Schabas. He teaches in the United Kingdom and he's taught in the US all over, but he's Canadian. And this guy's written like 20 books and like over 400 journal articles on these issues. When I say these issues, I'm talking about international human rights law, international criminal law, genocide, and capital punishment. And so, this is what he says. At the preliminary stage, that means the South Africans have to prove what they call a plausible case, right?
Yeah.
It's not proof beyond reasonable doubt. It's just a plausible case. So the threshold is a little lower.
Yeah.
And he goes on, he says, in his opinion, they met this threshold without any difficulty. And from his experience and his assessment is that South Africa would be successful. And then he goes on to say this, Faisal. He says, it would be stunning if the ICJ didn't follow the approach similar to the one it took in the case between Gambia and Myanmar, right?
Mm. Yeah.
So that's the precedent. So in a roundabout way, I'm not surprised, that people who follow this and the world experts. In fact, Professor Rez Siegel that I mentioned first,
Yeah.
he got 55, close to 60 world experts to sign a letter and a document to that effect, where they come to the conclusion that the acts of Israel are genocidal in character, and based on, I'll be happy to share that article with you as well.
Let's start our main discussion. Before we start, I want to actually request you, if you remember during our last conversation, you mentioned your theory when people are labeling different personalities as anti-Palestine or anti-Israel, and you had a very good remark about it. If you can share that and also explain your history, why you are in the humanitarian side now, as you mentioned your whole journey. If you can summarize it in a few sentences, that would be nice.
Yeah, yeah, it's an interesting question. My journey started in South Africa. I was born and raised in South Africa, under the apartheid system. So, human right, and I was the first lawyer, first person in my family to go to university, first person in the community to become a lawyer. So I did a lot of human rights work in South Africa, and then of course I continued that when I had to leave South Africa and come to Canada. Sometimes people get very emotionally attached to a country or to issues.
Yeah.
And so it's difficult for them to be really objective in a true sense. So I put my lawyer's hat on and my human rights hat on. And I say to myself, if you say you're pro-Palestinian, you would offend some Jewish people.
Yeah.
If you say you are pro-Israelis, you would offend some Palestinians and their supporters, right? So, because I'm a lawyer and I'm a human rights lawyer, although I don't practice as such anymore, but I'm still involved in the issues, I look at the situation and say, well, what is the law? What is international? What is human rights law? What is international humanitarian law? And most importantly, what is the rule of law?
Mm-hmm.
And so to cut it, without going into the details, as lawyers, we have a duty to seek justice, right? In the true form of, true sense of justice. So what is justice? Well, very simply put, in my view, it's try and get to the truth, get the facts, right? The true facts, not propaganda. What are the true facts? What is the credible evidence? What is the relevant credible evidence, right? Undisputed evidence. And then you apply those facts to the law, right?
Yeah.
And so that is why I said, when in Canada, there were so many students, law students, young lawyers being threatened and being refused interviews for jobs simply because they had spoken out in favor of justice, in favor of humanitarian law, and unfortunately, they were risking their jobs. And so
Mm-hmm.
I said, we need to have a focus on what is international humanitarian law and what is the humanitarian what is the rule of law.
Yeah.
So approach it from the basis, from a legal perspective, from an objective legal perspective. And I'm not an expert in all of this, but I know many experts who can help us understand that even in a better way. That's why I had the power. That's why we had this forum where we had over 1,000 people and very interested people wanting to learn more about this. Where I had Dr. Gabor Mate, who's Jewish, who's a friend of mine, and he's written multiple best-selling books. But on his personal life, he was a survivor of the Holocaust, and he was actually a Zionist in his youth. And then he found out the truth, right?
Yeah.
And then he said, "No, this is wrong. What the Israeli government is doing to Palestinians is wrong." So he's become vocal since 1967. He's not a Johnny come lately, right?
Yeah.
It's not a new thing for him. And so I bring people who are more knowledgeable than me in making me understand. So if I can understand, I can share my understanding with anybody who's willing to listen, right?
Yeah.
So in that regard, uh, uh, I thought it is better because on social media, you get people posting all sorts of things. So so out there, like, it doesn't make any sense. You see people are angry, and rightly so, but at the end of the day, you got to seek truth and you got to seek justice, in my view, right? And you got to apply the law equally
Yeah.
to everyone, to every country. And that's what the rule of law is, right? So there should be no exceptions. And that's what I was saying to you the last time, you know, where now the Western countries who seem to be supporting Israel, no matter what it does, appears that they either, they hypocrites, or they are enabling Israel, to continue this genocide, and in many aspects they are complicit in what is happening, right? So I take a more objective, bigger view than saying I'm pro-Israeli or I'm pro-Palestine. Now, unfortunately or fortunately, the facts and the law take me to the side that Palestinians are not being justly treated, not only today, but historically,
Yeah.
since 1948 onwards, right? So a lot of people who want to criticize me, or people or who have, my views. What about Hamas? What about October the 7th, right? That's their starting point. And in law, you have to have a context. Law is based on facts and context. If you don't have context, you don't have facts, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, we can address October the 7th, but like the United Nations Secretary General was so severely criticized by the Israeli ambassador to the United Nations for having said October 7th didn't happen in a vacuum. So that's where I come from, and I have many wonderful uh, people that are Israeli, are experts, and I listen to what they got to say because they are objective. So sorry to take a long time, but that's where I come from. I try to come from a more objective, uh, moral and legal basis, not just uh, blindly passionate about a certain issue, and you don't want to be open-minded about anything else you
Yeah.
know so that's what I meant. I'm not necessarily pro-Palestinian, but the facts and the law are leading me to conclude that they are being unjustly treated, and they have been unjustly treated, and that's got to be remedied. And that's why I was so proud of the South Africans, who brought this case.
One interesting thing that I have seen over the past, I would say like 2, 3 days since the hearing of ICJ, is that a few countries which were being in the situation as Palestine before are starting to stand up now as well, like Namibia against Germany as well. How do you see that unfolding now? Because I feel like it is going to be a domino effect as well. A lot of other countries will follow the same pattern and maybe build a case against a lot of other nations as well.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think the momentum will build still. Countries like Namibia, who were actually victims of genocide themselves,
Yeah,
by the Germans again,
yeah,
you know. So the Holocaust wasn't their first genocide,
yeah,
and ironically and sadly, they are promoting the third genocide now,
yeah,
because after the hearing of South Africa's case before the ICJ, uh, Germany came out in support of Israel.
yeah,
So, in my humble opinion, on the face of it, at least, maybe, I don't know if there's any more, there could be more, but I'm not a historian, but I know about Namibia because it was a neighboring country of South Africa, and it was ruled by Germany for a long time, and there were a lot of Nazis there, and some in South Africa too, So I think the momentum is going to build more in support of South Africa. And here's the thing: the global South, one can safely say that the overwhelming majority are in favor of the South Africans' case against Israel. I cannot say that about the West, though. And that speaks volumes of the hypocrisy I was talking about, of the double standards I was talking about, and enabling, I mean, all South Africa is asking is to stop this massacre. And they say no. So what does that mean? They say, no, continue with the massacre. We're okay with that, right? I mean, that is shocking, but that is so. And these Western countries are so hypocritical because just as I told you the last time, the West, including Canada, Germany, Netherlands, Denmark, and the United Kingdom, they filed a joint intervener petition to the ICJ just a few weeks ago, in which they are arguing exactly what South Africa is arguing. In fact, they're asking the court to lower the threshold of proof as it relates to children, especially because children victims have very special needs, and the effects on the trauma and the development is so different that the court must lower the threshold of proof and the intent, because they shouldn't make the intent so high so as to make any finding of genocide near impossible. That's what they said in the papers just a few weeks ago. Now, they didn't realize that South Africa was going to bring a case because South Africa only filed a case on the 29th of December, right? And so it is sad, but it also exposes, when it comes to whites. I mean, even when you talk about Russia invading Ukraine, within 2 months, not even 2 months, maybe 2 months, I think it was, give or take. I think it was in April. Biden declared what Russia is doing is genocide. Now, he's not a lawyer, but he's a head of state of the biggest, wealthiest, most powerful country in the world. And he's saying Russia is committing genocide. The same, the same with this, the president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. I'll send you, it's a short clip. She goes and gives a speech about what they are doing about denying access to electricity in this winter, blah, 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 is genocide. But no, not in Palestine. Right? Same with Blinken, right? So I would hope, at the very least, that some of the major Western countries would also come on board. There's some rumblings about Belgium, maybe. Belgium is an important country, a European country, but
Ireland,
to
I
me,
think, is on side.
Sorry?
Ireland, I think, is supporting Palestine.
I'm not too sure if Ireland officially has done that, but I know Ireland opposition party have been very strong pro-Palestinian for years now. For years, they actually have been exposing the double standards of the EU and the West for a long time. But I'm not. Maybe if Ireland is supporting it, great. But I'm talking about the United States and United Kingdom and Germany in the main, right? And Canada as well, right? So you can't talk about we believe in the rule of law, we are a democratic country, we believe in human rights, and then you turn a blind eye here, So we can't take them seriously when they start lecturing other countries, They got no credibility.
Do you think it is because of their own history? Because they are afraid, how
Oh,
Namibia
yeah.
is coming forward, maybe other countries will start targeting them as well?
Well, no. I think it's more simple than that, I think it's because they are colonizers themselves.
Yeah.
They have been colonizers themselves, right?
Yeah.
And so, in a sense, Israel is colonizing Palestine. So, can past colonizers criticize present colonizers? At one point, right? Second point I would make is that this is about white supremacy. Whites are above everybody else. Black and brown people, you have a different standard. Your life is not as valuable as a white life. That is an interpretation one can easily make. And let them defend. They say, no, we're not racist. We're not, why are you not treating every country equally then? especially just recently, you're supporting Gambia against Myanmar, which is a much weaker case than the South Africans have presented before the court, right?
Yeah.
So, it's about racism, it's systemic racism, white superiority, and them having been colonizers. You know, I mean, countries like the United States and Canada have not yet resolved its own colonization issues with indigenous peoples in the United States and in Canada,
Yeah.
right? Those issues are still ongoing.
Yeah.
So,
How do you, I mean, how have you seen South Africa actually bringing the whole nation together and building the case against Israel? Because I feel
mm,
like as a nation standing up against another nation for some other nation, you need the support of the whole nation yourself. So how did you see that unfolding? Because
yeah.
it I feel like it was out of the blue that South Africa suddenly make this decision, and nobody expected that, to be honest.
Well, it was a brilliant move, I think, in my respectful view. It was a really brilliant move. But here's the thing, right? Every signatory to the Geneva Convention has the same obligation that South Africa has, that where they see or potentials of a genocide, they should try and stop it, right? So that obligation goes. But your question is about how did the country come together and South Africa, launch this application? I think historically, it's not it just didn't happen now. The movement in South Africa, the movement for Palestinian rights has been growing for decades in South Africa because our struggle against apartheid in South Africa is very similar to the struggle of the Palestinians in Palestine. So we understood the struggle of the Palestinians, and the Palestinians understood our struggle.
This is one of the reasons why a lot of people are saying, like, even if the result will not be out straight away, but at least they could ICJ would request for a ceasefire straight away within the week.
Well, that's what South Africa is asking. They're not asking for a finding of genocide right
Yeah.
now. That will come at a later date, but they want to stop this carnage right
Yeah.
now. And so it's a two-step process. The first step is that's why it's called an urgent application. And that's why they went so quickly because people are being killed on a daily basis.
It's a very interesting point that you have raised. I believe that in a court case, every single word that you use have to be very critically analyzed, and the way you present it has to be very critically analyzed, and every single thing is going to be recorded on in the court of law, right? So
Absolutely.
that's why the way South Africa has presented itself, they are not saying that it is a genocide, but it's a plausible genocide.
Yeah, X that could be characterized,
Yeah.
and there's a plausible case
Yeah.
for that, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that is why every expert in the world thinks, South Africa should win this case, and stop this carnage. But the court doesn't have the right to enforce that order.
Yeah.
It goes to the United Nations Security
Security Council.
Council.
Yeah. One more thing that I want to ask you is, like, now that South Africa is presenting like that, what about the implications that Israel will have to face because of the words and the language that they are using themselves in the court of law? Like how they have actually officially labeled South Africa as supporting Hamas.
Yeah, it means nothing in law.
Okay.
They wasted the time of the court substantially by everything saying Hamas, Hamas, Hamas. It is irrelevant for the consideration of the court, completely irrelevant.
Mhm.
Assuming, assuming Canada does have a strong relationship with Hamas, what does it change? Does it change any of the facts on what South Africa has said, what Israeli is doing on the ground? It doesn't change anything. Hamas is not a party in front of the court.
Yeah.
Hamas can never be a party in front of the court because Hamas is a movement. It's not a country. only countries have jurisdiction to appear before the court. Hamas can never appear before the court. Now, I'm talking about the ICJ, right?
Yeah.
Now, could Hamas members be charged with a criminal offense for war crimes? Yes, but not in this court, in the International Criminal Court, which is a separate court, also in the Hague, but it's a separate court,
Okay.
right? And I think what's his name, Mr. Khan, is a prosecutor there. I forget his first name, but he's supposed to be investigating and bringing charges, like he brought against Putin. He issued a warrant of arrest for Putin, right? So Hamas can be treated in a similar way for having, if the investigation and if the evidence finds that they committed these war crimes, then yeah, they should be charged, but not before the ICJ. ICJ has got nothing to do with Hamas. They're dealing with countries. Israel is saying Hamas, Hamas, Hamas. Irrelevant. Here's the main point, though, in answering your question. Even if everybody agrees that and the Israelis have changed their stories about how many people killed, how they were killed, how many children, what was done to the children. They've changed their stories. Independent investigations have now, uncovered some of their lies or propaganda. But it really doesn't matter. Even if everything the Israelis said on day one, what Hamas had done, it does not justify the actions in return by Israelis, because the South Africans said it very clearly. Genocide can never be justified under any circumstances. And that is the law. Right? So even if Hamas can't commit genocide, because in my view, genocide needs, two things. You need the intention and you need the act. If you got the intention, because let's say they said, yeah, we want to wipe Israel off this map, right?
Yeah.
That's the intention. Have they got the capability to do that? Because you need the act, right? It's not just the intention, you need the act. Has Hamas got the capability, the resources, the power, the military power to wipe Israel off the map? No. Everybody knows that. So they can never commit genocide. But let's, just for the point of argument, let's say, yeah, they did. It's still, one genocide doesn't
Justify another.
justify another genocide. I mean, that's the law. In court, we talk about admissible evidence or relevant evidence. So many people, like, they talk about all sorts of nonsense, like, what about this? What about this? It's got nothing to do with the issue at hand.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm so tempted sometimes, people, and I don't entertain debates on social media, because people are out to lunch.
Yeah.
You waste your time and your energy. But I'm so often, because they say, okay, like somebody said, well, South Africa brought a case. Why doesn't it look after its own issues of electricity or crime or whatever it is? Okay. So what has that got to do with the case at hand yet?
Yeah.
In South Africa growing up, we used to have a saying like, so what has that got to do with the price of eggs? What is the price of eggs?
Yeah.
Now, if I ask you what is the price of eggs, you're wondering, what the hell is this guy talking about? Precisely, because it's got nothing to do with what we're talking about. But they are distracting. They want to distract you because why? They don't have the facts on their side and they don't have the law on their side. So what next do you do? You
Yeah.
distract.
Yeah.
Because you can't meet the case on its merits.
Before we end our conversation, one thing that is going to be very important is if South Africa wins the case, as you mentioned before as well, the court cannot enforce any legal action. It has to be enforced through Security Council. And we have seen this before on the decision of Houthi fighters, where US and the Security Council could not come to a conclusion, and Russia and China actually had the right to veto, but they didn't take it. That's another story. But in case of South Africa's case, What
Mm.
if US or UK, they veto? Then what will happen? And how will the
Uh,
Security Council enforce them?
yeah, if they veto it, that's the end of the Security Council, which
Yeah,
I anticipate that the US will,
yeah,
because they want this to continue, for their own purposes. Um, my understanding is that the matter can immediately go to the General Assembly,
mhm,
and the General Assembly will take a vote. Now, you remember the similar thing, United States was the only country that vetoed the ceasefire motion that went, right? And then it went to the General Assembly, right? What happened at the General Assembly? Overwhelming. Oh, I forget, 153 countries, a few abstentions. I think even the UK abstained. And by the way, the Canadians actually voted for this ceasefire in the General Assembly. But I think the UK abstained and a few other countries, but the majority of them, you can check it out, but I think it's over 153. The countries were saying we want a ceasefire. So if it goes to the General Assembly after it fails at the
mhm.
Security Council, I have strong reason to believe that because the General Assembly had already voted for a ceasefire before overwhelmingly,
Yeah.
they will do the same, and then they can decide how they want to enforce this.
And thank you so
Sure,
much,
absolutely.
Prakash. I really appreciate your time, and it was a very interesting discussion. And I'm sure we'll be continuing to discuss more about it because the things haven't finished yet. And
No, no, no. It's developing all the time.
yes, yes. So we
Yeah.
have to see what we can do on our side. And I'm sure, like, you are already part of something big, and I hope, like, people like me and other people who are listening can have some sort of a say as well. So,
No, absolutely. I told you before, everybody matters. Everybody can make a contribution in their own small ways, and collectively we can succeed. Uh, everybody matters, and we need to act together
yeah,
to bring about change because the forces on the other side are very strong.
yeah,
You know, but you know what we've got on our side? We've got truth and justice and the history on our side.
yeah,
And it's a matter of time. I told you the last time. You know, uh, Victory is certain, but it may take a long time.
yeah,
You know, and history has taught us that, right?
yeah.